A courtroom in Hamilton, August 2023. A man stands in the dock. He's about to be told he'll spend more than 2 decades in prison. Before the sentence lands, someone in the public gallery lifts a baby up over the glass, high enough for him to see, close enough for a goodbye. He reaches through, says hello, hugs are exchanged around him, hands shaken. Then the judge speaks, and the number is 22 years and 4 months. A voice from the gallery mutters something under their breath that won't make it into the official transcript cleanly, but everyone in the room hears it. He's 33 years old. 5 years earlier, Australian immigration police put him on a plane back to a country he'd left when he was 4. Within a year of landing, he'd co-founded a New Zealand chapter of an American motorcycle gang most Kiwis had never heard of. Within 2 years, that gang was moving methamphetamine nationally. Brothels were being used to launder proceeds, and someone had put 96 rounds into an occupied house in a turf dispute. His name is Jim David Thacker, known as JD. And what happened between that deportation flight and that Hamilton courtroom is one of the fastest, most consequential rises in the recent history of organised crime in this country. If you find this kind of digging worthwhile, a subscribe genuinely helps keep it coming. There's a fair bit of court record behind every one of these. Let's go back to where it starts. Not in New Zealand, on the Gold Coast. Jim Thacker left New Zealand at 4 years old. Australia was the only home he really knew. School, mates, adulthood, all of it happened there. He came to the attention of Australian police through, among other things, a peripheral role in the notorious 2013 gang riot at Broadbeach on the Gold Coast, one of those sprawling brawls between rival bikie chapters that made national headlines at the time. Thacker wasn't a central figure in it. He was present in the crowd, not involved in the fighting itself, and walked away with 150 hours of community service. That should have been the end of it. Instead, in 2018, Australian immigration authorities detained him under the country's controversial 501 bad character provisions and put him on a flight to New Zealand, a country he'd left as a toddler and barely knew as an adult. He wasn't alone on that trajectory. Alongside fellow deportees Hone Ronaki and Leon Huritu, men who'd been bandidos in Australia, Thacker set about establishing a chapter of that same club in the Bay of Plenty. A falling out with the Australian bandidos hierarchy changed the plan. Rather than operate under a banner he no longer had standing in, Thacker rebranded the group under a different name entirely, the Mongols, a California-founded motorcycle gang with a history stretching back to 1969. By 2019, barely a year after landing back in a country he didn't remember, Thacker had co-founded New Zealand's first Mongols chapter. This series has already documented what happened next in broader terms. The arrival of the Mongols brought a level of sophistication to New Zealand's drug trade that mirrored what the Comancheros had brought the year before. Under Thacker's leadership, dozens of kilograms of methamphetamine were sourced in Auckland, moved to the Bay of Plenty to be washed through the gang's networks, and pushed onward to distribution points around the country. It wasn't quiet. Rival gangs in the Bay of Plenty, the Mongrel Mob, the Greasy Dogs, didn't take kindly to a newly landed outfit trying to muscle into territory they already controlled. The result was a turf war violent enough that at one point, 96 rounds were fired into an occupied house. There's a specific incident that sits inside this story, like an unanswered question mark. Femme Fatale, a Wellesley Street venue in downtown Auckland describing itself as New Zealand's biggest gentleman's club, part bar, part strip club, part brothel. Late one night, a senior Mongols member was in a private room with friends when someone shot him in the back. Police never had enough to identify who pulled the trigger. What later reporting revealed was that the club's own manager had helped clean up the scene afterward and remove evidence, a detail that surfaced only when documents connected to the case were obtained years later. A gang leader shot in a brothel he had connections to. Evidence tampered with by someone running the venue. No conviction for the shooting itself. It's the kind of loose thread that sits alongside the main prosecution, never fully resolved, but part of the texture of what the Mongols under Thacker actually were. Not just a drug distribution network, but an organization entangled in Auckland's adult entertainment industry, in ways that occasionally produced violence nobody was ever held accountable for. Thacker was arrested in June 2020 as the primary target of Operation Silk, a dedicated police investigation into the Mongols' drug offending and violence. 24 gang members were eventually arrested through that operation. Thacker was convicted on 40 charges, including unlawful possession of firearms, participating in an organized criminal group, possession of methamphetamine, cocaine, and mundma for supply, and money laundering. Police searching his property found 811 grams of cocaine stashed in the roof, alongside cannabis and firearms. During the investigation and the years that followed, Thacker was held in a specialist high-security unit reserved for the country's highest-risk inmates, a prison within a prison. His mother, Tamaku Thacker, described visiting him there under conditions where she wasn't even allowed to touch her own son, and said the prolonged isolation was having what she called a massive impact on his mental health. Nearly 3 years passed between his arrest and the day he finally stood for sentencing. August 2023. The High Court at Hamilton, Justice Melanie Harland, presided over 53 charges tied to Operation Silk. Thacker, the last of the group to be sentenced, with several minor players still working through the district court. His mother addressed the judge directly before sentence was passed. "My son's life is in your hands." Crown Prosecutor Pollitt made a specific point in her submissions, that Thacker had a supportive, hard-working, loving family already established in New Zealand when he was deported, and could have leaned on that instead of building a gang and a national methamphetamine distribution ring from nothing. She called it, plainly, a significant development for New Zealand, and not the good kind. Thacker's own lawyer, Bill Nabney, didn't dispute that his client held a leading role in the gang, but he pointed to Vice President Hone Ronaki as running his own separate drug side hustle that Thacker allegedly knew nothing about, and said it was Ronaki who'd done most of the recruiting, pulling in younger members of his own extended whānau. Justice Harland took a starting point of 22 years and worked upward from there, adding uplifts for additional firearms offending, drug offending, money laundering, and perverting the course of justice, before applying discounts totaling 20%. The final term, 22 years and 4 months. A minimum non-parole period was set at 50% of the sentence, but under the law governing sentences of this length, the maximum term a person can be required to serve before parole eligibility is capped at 10 years. Justice Harland had to be recalled specifically to correct the non-parole figure down to that legal ceiling. Jim David Thacker left New Zealand at age 4, grew up on the Gold Coast. Peripheral involvement in the 2013 Broadbeach riot, 150 hours community service. Deported to New Zealand in August 2018 under Australia's Section 501 legislation. Co-founded a Bandidos-affiliated chapter with fellow deportees Hone Ronaki and Leon Huritu. Rebranded as New Zealand's first Mongols MC chapter in 2019 after a split with the Australian Bandidos hierarchy. Built a national methamphetamine distribution network sourcing product from Auckland and washing it through the Bay of Plenty. Sparked a turf war, including a 96-round shooting into an occupied house. Arrested June 2020 as primary target of Operation Silk. Convicted on 40 charges. 811 grams of cocaine found in his roof. Held in a high-security unit for nearly 3 years pending sentencing. August 2023. Sentenced at 33 years old to 22 years and 4 months, with a 10-year minimum non-parole period. Here's what sits underneath the sentencing figures and the courtroom detail in Jim Thacker's story. A man is removed from the only country he's ever really known, on character grounds, over a role in a brawl he wasn't even accused of fighting in. He lands somewhere he hasn't lived since before he could form memories of it. He has, according to the Crown's own submission, a loving and supportive family already there waiting for him. And within roughly 12 months, he's co-founding a motorcycle gang chapter instead. That's not a defense of what he built. The 96 rounds fired into an occupied house, the cocaine in the roof, the national distribution network, None of that gets softened by the fact that he didn't choose to be deported. But it does raise a specific, uncomfortable question about Australia's 501 policy, one this series keeps circling back to. When a country removes someone with deep, sometimes lifelong roots on one side of the Tasman and drops them into the other with nothing but a name and some distant family, what exactly is that policy solving, and for whom? Australia's problem, on paper, becomes someone else's the moment the plane lands. The second question is about the baby lifted over that glass dock. Thacker built something that moved methamphetamine across an entire country and left a house sprayed with 96 bullets. He's also, by every account in that courtroom, a son whose mother pleaded for his life to the judge, and a father, or something close to it, reaching through a gap to say goodbye to a child before a decade of separation began. Both of those things happened in the same room, on the same afternoon. Neither one erases the other. For anyone here in Aotearoa thinking about what this actually costs us, the answer isn't abstract. It's methamphetamine moving through the Bay of Plenty. It's rival gangs shooting up houses over territory that didn't used to have this particular fight in it. It's a policy decision made in Canberra that New Zealand police, prosecutors, and eventually a High Court judge in Hamilton had to spend years and millions of dollars cleaning up after. What do you reckon? When a deportation policy built to protect one country ends up exporting exactly the problem it was meant to solve, who's actually supposed to be held accountable for that?